Thanks for doing this. We just started. It's our first event. We're going to do more of things like this as it is pertinent to our culture and what we are going through. It's relevant to us to learn how to live out what it means to be a follower of Jesus as Christians, hosted by, of course, First Presbyterian Church in Lincoln. Pastor Sue is our pastor.
That's me.
That's you. So we're going to do a little introduction. Andrew is down there. Andrew, wave your hand. There he is. Andrew grew up a PK, right? Presbyterian preacher's kid. I think you said your dad and your brother. Is that right?
Yep.
You go to East Ridge Presbyterian Church here in Lincoln. You're a proud graduate of Lincoln East. Short rabbit trail. Just want you to know that I was the first graduating class at Lincoln East. We chose blue and white, and we chose Spartans. So go Spartans, right?
Nice. I like it. It's the best high school in America.
Well, that's what I think. But anyway, we digress. You also went to UNL, the Nebraska College of Law. Andrew's called Lincoln. You've been here 33 years, although you're from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
No, other side of the state. I'm a Steelers fan.
Steelers fan. Oh, well, they're not doing too bad.
No.
And anyway, you're the ruling elder at East Ridge Presbyterian Church, another PCUSA church, which is what First Pres is. And you're also active and volunteer and fundraiser for Republican Party at the state and local levels, and an active member of the Federalist Society. So my gosh, we have our Republican with a capital R, no doubt.
True.
Right? We have our token conservative here. So Andrew, welcome. This is fun. And I know that you and Sue are friends, so this is not anything new. Bill's with us. I'll introduce him in a minute. I mentioned Sue. She's ordained through PCUSA, having served in churches and presbyteries for 25 years. Or 30 years?
Yeah, almost 30.
30 years in churches. And so she's currently the head pastor at our church at First Pres in Lincoln. She has a doctorate. This is where, this is where I'm wondering, what am I doing in this room? She has a doctorate in ministry at McCormick Theological Seminary in Chicago, a master's of divinity in San Francisco Theological Seminary, a bachelor of arts from Boston University in religion and archaeology, and certified conflict mediator trained through Lombard Mennonite Peace Center, and a coach mentor for pastors trained through the Omaha Presbyterian Seminary Foundation. I look at that, I think, gosh, I've done nothing.
I'm an underachiever.
Geez, I know, it's like a professional student. So Sue and Linda, they've been married for 5 years, although they've been together a lot longer than that. They couldn't legally be married, now they are. And they enjoy kayaking and biking and hiking and camping, as well as dog training. They currently have a lovely and a beautiful Welsh Springer Spaniel, Katie, who is training to be a therapy dog. And I got to be with her today a little bit, and she therapied me some by letting me pet her. So that's Sue. Bill, raise your hand, Bill, is from...
Hello.
He's from the Lighthouse here in Lincoln, great organization that we partner with. He holds a BA and a Master's of Arts and Master's of Arts and Counseling degrees from Doane University. He is also a licensed restorative practices trainer, independently licensed restorative practices trainers for trainers. He was named the 2011 Nonprofit Executive of the Year when he was with United Way. Outstanding Speaker of the Year 2005 and 2013. Under his leadership, Lighthouse received the Better Business Bureau's Integrity Award of 2015, and has led his organization to be a COA, Council on Accreditation accredited, and that helps people become accredited in that space. Is that right, Bill? Did you get that right? Good.
Yep, that's correct.
In 2019, he wrote training and curriculum for the U.S. Department of Education. You see what I mean? What am I doing here? These people have so much to bring, and I'm thankful for them. He's executive director of Lighthouse here in Lincoln, where he has worked for the last 24 years. He has a family of members, or first members at First Pres. Bill and his wife, Michelle, have a 14-year-old son, and Bill would be described himself as our staunch independent. Am I right, Bill?
Yeah,
You're staunch middle of the road guy.
Middle of the road guy.
That's what you said, man. We have Sue, our token liberal. We have Andrew, our token conservative. And then we have Bill in the middle. And I'm going to try to see how we can work through this thing, but it's kind of fun. Obviously, there's a lot of toxic conversation going out there right now centered around politics, correct? But the reality of it is, the conversations are tough regardless. It could be within marriage relationships. It could be a lot of different spaces where we try to have conversations. We don't quite know how to do it in a way where it just doesn't pit me against you. In other words, I want to win and I want to prove my point right. And I know I've struggled with that a lot during my life and our marriage. Ellen can say amen to that. But what we want to do is talk about how do we get around that and how to do a better job with that. So we'll get to Bill and Sue in a minute. Andrew and Sue in a minute. Bill, first talk to us a little bit about the impact of our conversations and words with your work in restorative justice and how you've seen the relationships just shatter because of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, so, I've got to see it at many, many different levels, both with my family, with my profession, and words are very powerful. We'd like to say that words don't matter, but they're very powerful. And when we decide to start with ourselves, we already put that wall up. And that's when, if you will, a fight starts. And whether you're dealing with a teenager or an adult, we just want to be heard. So if I'm talking first and wanting to put my feet in the ground and making for sure I'm the one heard first, that makes somebody else spiral up and get agitated. So then what are we doing? Are we trying to create barriers in the relationships that we have or that we're trying to create? Or are we trying to open up and offer an opportunity for things to become closer? And I believe that through restorative practice and with giving the opportunity to listen first, that's where relationships really, truly start to be built.
You know what's cool about this? Bill's offered a follow-up 4-week course basically on these practices. For us, we'll be getting more information out on that through our church. And so you're able to join him via Zoom over a 4-week period to kind of lock in as he is the guy in this area, is working with the police department and other areas to help train them. And he's offered to do that for us for free as a added value, which is really cool. Andrew, I'm going to talk to you just for a second. I think there is something that we all do around there. We all have a tendency to kind of gather around people who think like us and talk like us, right? So that fuels this scenario. In other words, if I'm just watching and listening to certain, people with their political view or whatever it might be, that's going to fuel how I feel. It's going to fuel my narrative and my conversation. You being a Republican and with a capital R, right, and a follower of Jesus, how do you keep that from happening so that you can maintain open conversations with people?
First of all, I'd like to give a shout out to Kim Stock from Delaware, who's a friend of mine from Lincoln East, who is just joining because I shared it on Facebook. She's the Delaware Teacher of the Year.
Oh my God.
And she's amazing.
Yes.
And definitely on Sue's side of the aisle. So thanks for joining, Kim. That's awesome to see you.
I can tell it because it's Kim Stock, Michener, she, her. Yeah. Not anybody else has the going on. So
we were on the Lincoln.
Great to see you.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for inviting me. I might have to come in and out because I'm kind of running errands and stuff while my daughter's at cheer practice. But I wanted to see some Nebraskans. I grew up in Nebraska. Andrew and I went to high school together. We've remained friends via social media ever since. The first thing is first is I'm a believer and I'm a Christian. I just happen to be liberal. So, but I wanted to see some people who knew who Willa Cather is. So, hi everybody. Thanks for letting me join.
You're welcome. Thank you. So, Andrew, how do you do that? How do you maintain?
Well, I purposely
your friends, for example, your friend's example with her, and you guys are on the opposite end of the spectrum, but you're still friends.
Absolutely.
How do you keep from being so influenced by one side that you are not blinded to see points from the other side?
I think it's very important to get your news from a variety of sources. So I will admit that I enjoy Fox News, but it's not the only station that I listen to or watch. So I go out of my way to not only read the Wall Street Journal, which I do every day, but also to listen to other sources. I like NPR, and I also purposely watch one mainstream media source. It's usually ABC in the morning, so that I'm not just listening to what I want to hear. Although I will admit that the majority of the TV news that I watch is on Fox. But I think it's important for everyone to, in this day and age of limited objective media, to just stop complaining about that and go beyond it and watch both sides. So as far as other print media that I find really good, The Week, which is a magazine that comes on Saturday, old-fashioned print magazine, and kind of proves what I'm saying you should do, works, is they offer both sides of the media. They, on every story, what they do is, if they quote the New York Times, they quote the Wall Street Journal. If they quote CNN, they quote Fox News. And that's maybe our new paradigm. Is there's really, in my opinion, no true objective source. I do love NPR, but it's definitely left-leaning. Lots of facts, but there's definitely a slant. So you have to look at or listen and read both sides, in my opinion. I endeavor to do that. And you're right, I have a very diverse group of friends, which I love because I love the discussion. And debate never bothers me because I know I'm right.
That's awesome. So how do you approach that? That same idea of being more of a left-leaning follower of Jesus.
I kind of start out with one of my favorite cartoons of all time. It's a Peanuts cartoon. Snoopy's sitting on top of his doghouse typing away on his typewriter, and Charlie Brown comes up and says, "I hear you're writing a theology book. Do you have a title for it yet?" And Snoopy's typing away, and his response is, "I sure do. Title is, Has It Ever Occurred to You You Might Be Wrong?" And I really do keep that in front of me pretty much all the time. It's unlike Andrew, I don't know that I am right all the time, although I think I'm right more than he is. But God will be the judge of all that. But no, I approach my relationships with people who have different views than I do with humility. At least I try to. One of the things Bill talked about was, your starting point is learning about the other person. Where are they at? And I know myself well enough to know that I'm able to fine tune and better understand what I believe when I'm in conversation with people who have different beliefs, because they challenge me, hopefully in a nice way, but they challenge me to really think about, where are my beliefs coming from? Where are my facts coming from? What do I know? What I don't know? And it doesn't always mean that my conversations with other people have me.
Oops.
Oh, somehow I got muted. So, okay, I'm back, I think. So as I've said, I try to approach this with humility and learn from the other person, because in doing that, I learn more about myself and my beliefs. And sometimes I come away with a much stronger belief in what I had to start with. And sometimes I come away saying, there's things that I didn't know. And sometimes I come away with saying, I'm still not where you are, the other person, but I understand you a whole lot better. And I could see why you're coming at it the way you are. And so when we could build those bridges of learning from each other, then it allows us to have constructive conversations about issues and not view each other as the enemy.
Bill, how can we build relationships through conversation? In other words, Sue mentioned it, actually they both did, but by asking good questions and really honestly trying to find out. There's a problem that I've had in the past. I don't know if anybody else has struggled with it, but I'll sit down with someone on the opposite side of me and I'll ask them a question. And while they're answering me, I'm already formulating my response. I'm already trying to figure out, okay, why are you wrong? And how am I going to convince you, right? That gets you nowhere, right, Bill? And how do we get around that?
Well, I mean, you have to start with the aspect of starting every conversation with an open heart and an open mind. So I'm not coming in trying to get a certain answer. I go in saying, how am I going to strengthen this relationship with this person? I can't do that by wanting to attack. I can't do that by wanting to put my point out there, because again, that brings up walls. So my first when I walk into any situation is, how can I improve this relationship? So in order for me to improve a relationship, I have to start with you.
Mm.
What's going on with you today?
Mm.
Give me your perspective of this. There'll be a time and a place where we can share our point of view and stuff. That's only after we allow those to share their point of view, because that opens the door for open conversation. If we do not start there, we're essentially trying to talk through a wall.
Yeah.
And all of us that have been married or have relationships, we know what it's like to try to talk through a door or a wall. It's not very effective. And so it's the same way, this fake wall that we put up by just trying to prove our point or that we're right all the time.
And it's fairly easy to sense for anybody who is remotely relational or whatever, or in tune, to know if someone's coming at you. I mean, even if they may be asking questions in the tone and other things, you can pick up on that pretty quick, can't you?
Correct. Yes. And the other thing, and this is a piece of restorative too, it has to do with that shame aspect.
Mm.
And we have to be very careful on what people perceive as shame, because that builds up walls in a different way too. And that creates a toxic environment for them to then just want to argue and fight. And again, emotion never gets us to a positive place.
Mm.
In restorative practice, we talk about we need to respond to situations, but we can't react to situations. When we react, there's emotion involved. And when emotion is involved, 100% of the time, we're doing the wrong thing.
Yeah. Andrew and Sue, I got a question for you. How do you have a conversation? You can talk back and forth amongst yourselves if you want to, or just one-on-one, doesn't matter to me. How do you have a conversation with somebody on the other side in a way that you want to listen to make sure the relationship is restored, the relationship is healthy, but where you're not feeling, you know what, I'm basically throwing out all of my beliefs, my convictions, because I can't be heard here and prove that I'm right. How do you have that? Those are, I mean, that's to me, that's a lot where the rubber meets the road, right? I mean, we have a hard time getting in there, and I can listen to that kind of stuff, but at some point you go, but I know I'm right about this. How do you get up on that in light of the bigger picture? Either one of you guys want to jump in?
Yeah, I can go ahead and do that. And Bill's already alluded to it. It's learning about the other person. I think, Bill, the way you put it was, what can I do to strengthen this relationship? Sometimes we actually don't have a relationship with someone who's wanting to have a conversation. Let me rephrase that. Who's what might be wanting to have an argument with us. I can talk to Andrew all day about politics, and we're not going to get in a fight. We may not agree with each other, but we're going to have a good, robust, fun conversation. But then there are some other folks in our lives where it's a different kind of a relationship, or sometimes it's a comment on Facebook. It's no relationship except that, and they come out with this sledgehammer, it feels like. And our instinct is, I'm going to knock down everything that they said. I'm going to prove that I'm right. Shame is a good word, because I think deep down, sometimes that's what we're aiming to do to another person. For myself, there's actually several tools out there that help me step back from that, step back and away from the emotion, and come at the conversation from a different perspective. I'll share one of them right now. Dr. Karen Tamaris has developed what's called the change conversation cycle. And it's nothing new, but it's a clear 5-step process for how do you get beyond those emotions? How do you get beyond that defensiveness to truly learn about the other person? And the very first step is asking questions with the true spirit of curiosity. If you aren't really curious about that other person and what makes them tick, then you're not going to be able to get to the rest of the steps. Yeah. So for me, that it starts with caring enough about the other person and about the relationship to ask questions. And out of those questions, we can often, if the other person wants to play along, we can often get beyond the hammers at each other and find out what are our common issues, what are the common things that we are concerned about. And then in the role of conflict management, we often talk about our goal is to move away from opposite sides of the table to sit on the same side of the table with the issue we're concerned about on the other side, so that we may come at it from different directions, but we're coming at the same thing for good reasons.
Mhm.
But it starts with being curious and asking questions and being willing to step back and say, okay, I don't have to be right in this moment. I don't have to make them understand me in this moment. There's time for me to share my views later.
Andrew, you're nodding your head yes. Go ahead.
Oh, absolutely. And I guess I agree. And what sums it up for me is it's okay to disagree. That's good. You know, it's the American way. Our country was founded on compromise. Our whole system of government is a compromise between large states and small states. And I think divided government works well. I think I'm a believer in the two-party system. I think that it works well to have loyal opposition and to agree to disagree. And I post a lot on Facebook and have been accused incorrectly of being a quote troll, end quote, which is a social media term for somebody who is bombastic. And that's not the case. What I do is I post issues and I encourage discussion, not necessarily because I think I'm going to convince people of my view or that I'm right, but that I think discussion is healthy. I love the public square. You know, in a previous era, I would have loved to have given speeches in the public in the city square, and that's healthy. That's democracy, in my opinion. And so it's okay to disagree. And I would say that's a problem today, is that people on both sides don't think it's okay to disagree. They think that if you don't agree with them, you're wrong. And I was teasing earlier, even though I am always right. But it's okay to disagree, and that's the intolerance that we're seeing on both sides of people who disagree, and that's un-American.
Yeah, it is on both sides. I mean, I will grant it, right? I mean, Sue, would you agree with that? I mean,
Absolutely.
there are people in the Democratic or more liberal camp that have zero tolerance, a lot of hate for anything that even smacks or smells of being on the conservative side. And the conservative side, it's the same way for the Democratic or the liberal side. How in the world do we get past that? I mean, we talked about some of that stuff, but in real life, is it just a hopeless cause? Do I even bother trying to have those conversations with people that I think are so close-minded? Or is there a way just to, and this sounds kind of bad because it's like I'm asking the question, how do I do that in a way to change your mind? I'm not. How do we do it in a way where we can actually have good dialogue?
I think for me, this is where my faith comes into it. In my world, everybody's a child of God. Everybody is loved by God. And so if everybody's loved by God, then I'm not allowed, I guess, to see someone else as the devil or as evil incarnate. And sometimes we hear language similar to that, to paint people on the other side, whichever side you happen to be on. And that denies the image of God in the other person. And so if we're going to respect the image of God, then we have to respect the fact that there's something good in every single person. And it takes conversation sometimes to get rid of the crud on top on both sides, to see that glimmer, that light inside the other person. And it takes effort, and it takes time, it takes curiosity. But God has given us a wonderful mosaic of people in this country and in our communities that if we work together for the common good, I don't think there's anything that can stop us. But we have to take the time to dig underneath the crud and find our common causes and find our common concerns and our common grounding so we can work together.
What are the issues beneath the issues?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. Right?
Yeah.
Bill,
usually the issue is not the issue.
Right. Bill, have you always been so chill?
Oh. Absolutely not.
So middle of the road, just this independent kind of guy, just so
Definitely not.
whatever, man. I'm just like, I'm good.
No.
How'd you get there?
It's been a long road, and I got to tell you that some of it came from marrying Michelle. And when I first got married, I was a lot like Andrew, thinking I needed to always be right. And it took me a few headaches to understand that I can be right or I can be happy. And a lot of the arguments and toxic conversations that I wanted to dig my heels in really gave no value to anything. And it was just about the ego aspect of, I can't be wrong. I know I'm right on this. And it turned into something much bigger that could have destroyed a wonderful relationship. And so that's really where it started. And then my work at Lighthouse has helped me continue down that road, because I really need to take the time to truly connect with the young people to help meet them where they're at so they can be better connected.
Mm.
And then I also then have to not live in fear. And my board president explained to me what fear represents as future events appearing real. And so
Yeah.
I think a lot of times we plant our feet because we're scared of what we think might happen, or we're scared that our values might not be represented if we listen to this person. So it's just been something that I've just grown and have learned some more wisdom to be able to take on this world in a different way.
Thank you. I just someone said to me, talking about the acronym you just used, right? Someone said to me, if Biden wins, we're going to be a socialist country, and there goes the economy and there goes the world, right? Somebody said, the same person said, but if Trump wins, it's a scorched earth thing. Everybody's going to be burned to the ground anyway. So what does it matter? So it's like that projecting into the future, what we think might happen.
Correct.
If a certain party gets elected, and that's fear. It really is fear. Andrew, how in the world could anybody possibly vote for Biden?
Oh, pretty easily.
I thought we'd mix it up a little bit just to see how we have this conversation, right?
I think he's a good man. I think he's is a loyal American. I think he's a great public servant, and I think he'd be a good president. He just doesn't share my policy views, and so that's why I'm not voting for him. But I think to answer your question, I think easily someone could, and many will, vote for the vice president. So,
Sue, how can anybody vote for Trump?
Andrew had the easier question.
That's true.
Well, in all honesty, I mean, here's one thing about President Trump. He tapped into something that was already present in our country before he was elected. During the 2016 election, he tapped into a fear and a frustration that had been simmering, I think, underneath the surface for a long time. Even as a Democrat, the policies of the Democrats really fit more who I am and what's important to me. And in theory, those policies should have raised up some of these people who felt like they've been ignored for so long, but it hasn't always happened for them. And so, if you feel like you haven't been able to be heard or respected by one side, and then President Trump comes along and he taps into that, I could easily see why people voted for him in 2016, and I think there's still that angst among some in our population who feel that the Democrats aren't speaking their language, but not even the Republicans are. Trump is, and so they're still hopeful that they're going to fare better under Trump. So I think I could see why people can vote for Trump.
Yeah.
I can give you a window into that world pretty easily. I grew up in Western Pennsylvania. That's where my family is from on both sides, and where my father's first two congregations were north of Pittsburgh, and where I grew up till I was in ninth grade. when my dad announced that we're moving to where? Lincoln, Nebraska. I'd never been west of Cleveland. I thought my life was over. What are you doing to me?
The promised
But
land.
I can give it. Sue is absolutely right. Let me tell you that I grew up in a community that was 70% Italian and Catholic and working class and very democratic. That community voted 60, 70% for Walter Mondale in 1984. They thought that the Democratic Party represented them. Where I grew up is 14 miles from Youngstown, Ohio. So if you want to imagine, all my friends' dads were Bo Pelini, okay? And that paradigm, it's hard for us in the Midwest to understand the Rust Belt. That paradigm has completely changed. My home county, Lawrence County, voted 67% for Donald Trump, which, I haven't lived there for 33 years. So that's amazing to me. But not when I talk to my friends who I've reconnected with, many of whom on Facebook, it is Trump country, because they feel that, the factories are gone, that the economy has left them behind. And Sue is absolutely right. That, in a way that I don't know that we can understand fully in the Midwest, is one of the main reasons that the president won in 2016, is because all of those very loyal Union Democrats are now very loyal Trump supporters. And I wouldn't say, you're right, Sue, it's not Republican Party supporters. They really like Donald Trump.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
No doubt about it.
Here's a question, Bill. You can jump in on this too. But and by the way, we have a chat down here. So if anybody has any questions or whatever, comments or whatever, type in and we'll get to them. What I've seen a lot from both sides, and I've seen it in my own life, is I'll let my anger turn into hate for the other side if I see things I disagree with. And then that blinds me to be able to even see anything good from the other side. Does that make sense? How do I mean, we've talked about some of this stuff, but have you ever struggled with that? And if so, how have you dealt with it? No, Andrew, you never struggled
No,
with
I don't hate people. I love everybody. That's one of the reasons I'm an estate planner. I would be a terrible litigator. Pam Carrier's on here, and she was the first female partner at the largest law firm in Lincoln, Klein Williams, and she probably enjoyed litigating. Her dad was the Chief Justice of the Nebraska Supreme Court. He probably didn't mind litigating. I can't stand it because I'd be terrible at it because someone might not like me. So I have to stick to the happy stuff. But no, hate's not in my vocabulary. And I love a lot of progressives, and I love differing points of views. So it pains me when the president and others clearly, and I would be the first to admit it, engage in race baiting and other stuff like that, which is super unfortunate and embarrassing to me. It doesn't change the fact that I'm a conservative ideologue, and I agree 95% with the positions of his administration, which is why I'm going to vote for him. But I don't like the fear mongering and the underlying tones that are the other side is bad and terrible. So that doesn't get us forward. That's for sure.
I was going to say that didn't help anything, does it, for conversation?
No.
It just
No.
And he's very much, I'm right. No one's done what I've done before. I'm the greatest and the best ever. Just read my tweets, right?
Yeah.
And it's so frustrating and irritating at times. He would just throw his phone away and just go to work.
Well, believe me, there's a lot of us on this side who wish he wouldn't tweet. On the other hand, I am very active in the party, and I enjoy politics as a sport, if you will. Some of my political operative friends say that's exactly why he's successful, is because and I've come to think that this may be true in some regards, that he's able to go around the media, kind of like Ronald Reagan did with speeches to the country, but in a new era, and go around the media and deliver his message directly to the people.
Yeah. Jane just posted a question. I don't know if y'all saw it or not, but maybe Sue, Bill, you can jump in on this one. We've talked a little bit about it, but for effective dialogue from both parties, need to want to play fair. Boy, that's a good word. How do you set the stage so that the other person will want to engage in productive dialogue?
I can take a stab at that. It's our responsibility to create a safe place where that person can let down their defenses enough to have a conversation. And first of all, I think we also have to recognize the other person may not want to play fair. They may not want to have a real conversation. And if that's the case, we respect that. I'm not going to die on a hill trying to have a conversation with someone who wants to have an argument. Argue with somebody else. But it is our responsibility to try to set that stage, and that begins by creating a safe place, asking those questions in such a way that they truly feel like you are curious and you aren't just trying to get ammo to come back at them with something. Whatever we can do to make them feel, okay, I can really talk about what bothers me or what my issues are. And sometimes they may not know what they are exactly, but I think we have to ask genuine, curious questions that invite conversation in a safe place.
Bill, jump in here a little bit, because I think that's key. And you mentioned it, people, Trump supporters feel like they weren't heard before. In 2016, you mentioned it, and they wanted a voice. And so they went and they had a voice. And I think that's a lot of politics. Both sides say, I just want to be heard. People want to be heard. They want their voice. I have an opinion. Does it matter? Or do I feel like I'm just getting squashed here and silenced by the masses? So how do we step in and ask good questions to set the stage for the other person to have a good and productive dialogue?
Look, I want to comment quickly on your wanting to be heard aspect. I mean, and this might not be an opinion that everybody in this room is going to share of mine, but it is my opinion that the riots that happened escalated to the place that they did because when they start by talking, then they start to yell because each step of the way they don't feel heard. And then they go as far as destroying property, which we can all agree that this is wrong. This is something that should not be done. Most of those organizations have nothing to do with what's going on with the unrest. However, then people started listening once it got escalated to a certain degree. So we have to create what we call fair process and restorative practice of being able to get to that point first of creating that environment that everybody feels heard. And you can do that through conversations. You can do that through restorative circles where you sit down and have rules that you engage in. But it's always starting with everyone else first, because to be quite honest with you, I think the only way to get to play fair from parties is by yielding to them first to say, tell me your point of view of things. Mm-hmm. We will always have an opportunity to share ours, but until the person feels heard, they will not listen to you.
And we're impatient to want to be heard, right? It's hard to ask questions to listen because I got something to say here.
Well, I think that is somewhat human nature that we can teach and we can be taught how to listen first, having that active listening first. Yeah. Because to be honest with you, if you're in an emotional state, I have to get you through the emotion first. So like, that does suck. Oh, I can see how hard that is. I can see how that can make you angry before they start opening up to what's making them angry and where their standpoint really is. Mm. So, I mean, restorative, I've seen time and time again, and it just keeps boggling my mind of how effective it is. Even when people that I'm sitting in front have made it very clear for years, they hate me, they hate what we do. And then by the end of the conversation, it has shifted completely the other direction. And now they're saying how wonderful this place is and how wonderful and what they need their young person to get as a part of here because they're safe here, because all the things that are from the opposite end, because now I've allowed them to share and feel heard. Where before we were restorative here at Lighthouse, we just couldn't get there because we're trying to say, well, but this is why we're doing it. This is why your son or daughter got kicked out. They weren't willing to hear that at that point because they didn't feel heard. They weren't capable of fighting for their child first.
Yeah.
Once I get them there, everything changes.
Jane, does any of that help? Good. Thumbs up. All right. That's good to know. I was with my brother last week, and we were talking about this thing, and talking about the tongue and how, as believers and followers of Jesus, our tongue is crucial, right? I mean, there's a lot of proverbs that talk about that, and so I started reading some and thinking about some, and a couple that I read, and we can just share and talk about this. Proverbs 15:1 says, "A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." And I think that's what we're all saying here, right? Putting people on the defense right away. The words of the reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Just, there are some great scriptures about how we use our tongue and the impact of our tongue. Then I think for me, Jane, we've talked about Lectio Divina, just, going to different scriptures and having that scripture, thinking about it throughout the day, meditating on those words that can kind of permeate our DNA and our thoughts. Sue, we've talked about spiritual practices too. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Steeping ourselves in those reminders of Proverbs and some of the other scriptures out there that talk about building up. One of my favorites is from First or Second Corinthians. It's odd, I can't tell you which one it is, but Paul talks about, our goal is building up the body, not tearing down the body. And it seems like so often we feel like we have to tear others down to feel good about ourselves. And we don't. I feel so much better when I help build someone up. I mean, honestly, I'm on cloud 9 when I'm able to do that. When I tear someone else down, and I've had my moments when I've done that, I don't ever feel good after that. And it makes us all hurt, and it makes us all weaker. But anything we could do to encourage each other. And if we approach our conversations with those who have different opinions than us, even on really important issues to us, if we approach those conversations with, that question of how can I build them up in a healthy way? Not a matter of feeding their ego, not a matter of, stoking their fires on whatever their issue is, but how can I help build them up so that they see that they are that child of God, so that they hear that they have a voice? That's wisdom.
The pastor that we had in our life years ago, he's passed away now, but one thing he would say to me whenever he'd meet somebody new, and he'd have an internal prayer and say, "Lord, let me see what you're doing in this person's life and let me be a part of it and not go against it." In other words, let me be sensitive to what the story is, what's going on, so I can speak into the kind of what you were talking about, Sue. So any more questions you want to post or any thoughts that you may want to have? I don't want to belabor this thing and make it longer than we need to have it, but there's been some hopefully good dialogue. If you've enjoyed it, can you write amen, or is that too evangelical?
Hey, Mike, could I just have a couple more thoughts?
Well, I'm sorry, Bill. We're out of time. No, I'm
okay.
kidding.
All right. I'll save that for our follow-up.
No, you're good. You're good.
So I did want to mention, because, as we were talking about kind of, you even just mentioned it, ego. Ego is one thing as a human being that we have. And again, I'm going to allude to my board president, because I think, he mentioned in his book, Thoughts, Power of the Mind, ego stands for edging God out. And I think as Christians, we look at how are we working closer to God. And if our ego is edging God out, what can we do to further strengthen that relationship with God is by allowing others to have a voice, right? So, and I look at all of the things, and time again through the Bible, it talks about listen first and talks about love.
Yeah.
The Lord is compassionate, gracious, slow to anger, abounding in love.
Yeah.
As a Christian, and that's why I attach to restorative practice so much, I believe that these things are so closely related that it speaks to me of my walk with God has to do with helping others and listening to others to create a different relationship, because I believe all of us are connected, and it's my job to figure out where that connection lies and then what the meaning behind it is. It's not my job to judge anybody. It's not my job to get my point across to anybody, because my walk is mine.
Yeah. That's the scripture you talked about where it says, be quick to listen, slow to speak, and
Yes.
slow to anger, right? It's
Yep.
just, it's interesting how the order of that is: listen before you speak, and anger is at the end. And normally we flip that. We get angry and then we talk and then we don't listen, right? So I think it's that's a good word, Bill. Thank you. Andrew, do you have any parting words for us before we call it a night?
Well, I'm just thinking about lots of things that people who are important in my life have said that agree with what you are mentioning. My grandfather, Kerr, always said, you're not learning anything when you're talking. And listening is key to understanding each other. And also, I think when people are rude or vulgar, my mom would always is fond of saying that people who swear a lot have a small vocabulary, and I think that's true. And I would add that people who lob personal attacks probably are pretty insecure about their own views, and probably aren't as secure in knowing that they're right. So, personal attacks and being mean not only don't get you anywhere, but they're certainly not going to convince anybody of anything. So a truly persuasive person is going to listen, see where the other side is coming from, and then over time convince them to vote Republican.
Yeah.
Nice
Couldn't help
try,
but get that in
Andrew.
there, Bill. So counteract.
I just kind of bouncing off of something Andrew said about, often some of the most vitriolic attacks are probably from people, and this is an unfair generalization, but I'll say it anyway, probably from people who have low self-esteem or don't know their own positions well. And to me, that's an opportunity. When I see someone lashing out with great hatred, great anger, that actually is something that occurs to me is here's a person who's probably hurting.
Yeah.
And so the question becomes not how do I win, but how do I help them find some healing?
Yeah.
And I think, the restorative practices is one way that we invite people into relationships where that healing can happen. I think, practicing these other steps for having conversations that allow us to find common ground can be a safe way to invite the defenses to come down so we can have a possibility for healing. There's a scripture where, Jesus stands at the door and knocks. And I think that's part of our job as followers of Christ to knock on those walls gently, but hard enough so that we get their attention so that they know it's safe to start taking them down.
Yeah.
And that takes patience and prayer and love on our part.
I think as you guys were talking, a couple of things come from my own life and own reactions and things that I've seen. And that is, I was having a conversation last week with how I've seen the last year and a half, just overwhelmingly how much God loves me, just through grace and through things that other people have given to me and to us. And I said, I don't know how sometimes to embrace that. I don't know how sometimes to wrap my mind and my heart around the fact that I am enormously and completely and unconditionally loved by God. And they said, I don't know that we ever will, but it goes because God's love is incomprehensible to a degree. But I think it goes back to what you said, Sue. We all want desperately to know we're loved, deeply loved and cared for. And you said that earlier, just we want to make sure people feel valued and heard and loved in our conversations, right?
Absolutely.
Feel safe.
Hey, Mike, I wanted to show you something. Oh, yeah.
Yes, the blue and white East High Spartans.
Yay, that's wonderful.
Can I get an amen? There we go. That's awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys. Was this helpful at all? Was this good? Good dialogue and stuff like that? Okay, we're going to repost this on Facebook. What we do, if you think it's Ellen, go Big Blue.
All right.
Good job, Ellen. Ellen, I was a class of 68. She was 69. That's when we met. Fell in love, and now we've been married for 50 and a half years.
Nice.
I know. She is a saint. So anyway, repost this, and we'll get it out there, and we'll do this again sometime, maybe on other topics. Would that be good? Would it be helpful? All right. Thanks, everybody. Sue, any
Okay.
parting words?
Yeah, just parting words. Just a reminder that Bill's going to be putting together a 4-week course for us on restorative justice techniques, I guess.
Yep.
And so we'll be putting all that information up on our church website and on Facebook as well. So if you like our church Facebook page, First Presbyterian Church, Lincoln, Nebraska, you'll be able to get those notices when we put those out of those classes.
And then share them with your friends. And I think, Andrew, you've got 5,000 friends. So
I'll share it.
we get 1% of those people coming. That'd be like a huge success. So
I was excited that Kim was here. That was awesome. So,
isn't that great? All right, guys.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah,
Bye.
thank you for joining us, and watch for the video soon. Thank you, Sue.
Bye.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
everyone.
Have a great evening.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us at First Presbyterian Church, where faith is nurtured, curiosity encouraged, diversity welcomed, and all are loved. Find out more about us at fpclincoln.org or find us on Facebook.